A wild horse challenged all the tamers, until a 10-year-old girl touched its fierce heart. Among broken ropes and shattered dreams, Sophia discovered that some free souls aren't tamed, they are won over. An emotional journey where patience overcomes force and love conquers fear. Leave your like, subscribe, and comment. Have you ever felt an inexplicable connection with an animal? The sun rose lazily over the dusty hills of Silver Creek Ranch, painting the sky with shades of orange and red that seemed to announce another day of lost battles. In the main stable, separated from the other animals by thick iron bars, a stallion, black as a moonless night, awaited its next adversary. Lightning, as the bravest cowboys called him, had the wild fire of the northern mountains in his eyes, and in his steaming nostrils, contempt for every human attempt at domination. The heavy morning air carried the smell of dry hay mixed with the fear of the men approaching, and every neigh of the animal seemed like thunder announcing a storm. Sophia watched everything from the dusty window on the second floor of the modest house where she lived with her father. Her small fingers traced designs on the glass, as her brown eyes followed every movement of that magnificent being that defied the established order of the ranch. She was only 10 years old, but she carried in her chest an ancient wisdom about horses, inherited perhaps from her mother who had left too soon, leaving only memories of soft songs and the scent of lavender on her stored clothes. A restlessness grew in the girl's chest each day, as if something inside her knew that her destiny was intertwined with that untamable animal. Charles, her father, appeared at the bedroom door, his face marked by the usual worry. The wrinkles on his forehead told stories of sleepless nights since Helen had left, and his stooped shoulders carried the weight of raising a daughter alone in a world of rough men and dangerous horses. He kissed Sophia's forehead and murmured the usual words about keeping distance from the stables, especially the one where lightning waited like a contained storm. The sunlight streaming through the window illuminated the premature gray strands in his hair, silent witnesses to his daily struggle between protecting too much and loving too little. In the main corral, the 7th tamer of that month was preparing for another attempt. Michael Miller had come from afar, bringing with him the reputation of having tamed the worst cases in the neighboring state. His spurs jingled with every step, and the whip in his hand seemed an extension of his arrogance. The cowboys gathered at the fences, some betting on how long he would last before he bit the dust. Mr. Smith, the ranch owner, watched from his porch, his face heavy with the look of someone seeing money slipping through one's fingers like water through a sieve. When Michael entered the paddock, Lightning raised his head like a king offended by the presence of an insolent subject. The horse snorted, and clouds of steam came from his nostrils as if he were an ancient dragon awakening from its sleep. The tamer advanced with calculated steps, but there was something wrong with his posture, the excessive confidence of someone who underestimates the adversary. Sophia narrowed her eyes, sensing the disaster before it even happened. The stallion waited for the exact moment. When Michael got close enough, Lightning reared up on his hind legs, reaching an impressive height against the blue sky. His black mane flew like war banners, and the neigh he let out echoed through the valley like a cry for freedom. The tamer tried to back away, but it was too late. With a precise movement, the horse spun its body and delivered a kick that sent the man against the fence with a dull thud. Michael rolled in the dust, his hat flying off, and when he tried to get up, he staggered like a drunk before falling again. The cowboys ran to help the tamer while Lightning trotted through the paddock, with his head held high in victory. Sophia watched how the animal moved. It wasn't just anger she saw in his movements, but a deep sadness, as if each attempt at domination tore away another piece of his wild soul. The girl felt hot tears stream down her face without fully understanding why. That night, during the silent dinner she shared with her father, Sophia gathered the courage to ask about Lightning. Charles chewed his piece of bread slowly before answering, his eyes lost in memories he preferred not to revisit. He told how the stallion had been captured in the northern mountains, where he lived freely with his herd. He spoke about the animal's wild beauty attracting the attention of hunters who sold him to the ranch for a fortune. And he finished with the usual warning: wild horses are dangerous, especially for little girls who think too much and feel even more. But Sophia had something. In her blood her father couldn't understand. When the full moon illuminated her room that night, she remembered the songs her mother used to sing, ancient melodies that spoke of harmony between man and nature. Helen always said that animals could sense the truth in people's hearts, that brute force would never conquer what patient love could achieve. The girl fell asleep with those words echoing in her mind like a promise whispered by the wind. The following days brought more failed attempts. The 8th tamer came and went. The 9th didn't even enter the paddock. A single look from Lightning was enough to make him give up. Mr. Smith called a meeting with all the ranch employees, his deep voice echoing in the main barn as he announced the ultimatum. 6 months. To tame the stallion, or he would be sold to a foreign buyer who would certainly use even crueler methods. Charles felt the weight of responsibility fall on his shoulders like an anvil. He was the administrator, and the failure would be his too. It was on an especially silent dawn that Sophia made the decision that would change everything. The dew still covered the grass when she crept down the stairs, avoiding the creaking steps. Her heart pounded like 1,000 hooves, but there was a certainty in her chest that propelled her forward. The ranch slept, except for the crickets singing their nocturnal symphony and an owl hooting somewhere distant. Lightning's stable was set apart from the others, a reinforced structure that looked more like a prison than a shelter. Sophia approached, slowly, her bare feet feeling the cold earth beneath her. When she got close enough to see the stallion through the bars, she stopped. He was awake, as if waiting for her, his black eyes reflecting the moonlight like 2 obsidian pearls. For a moment that seemed eternal, girl and horse stared at each other in silence. Then Sophia did something no tamer had attempted. She sat on the ground, at a safe distance, and began to sing. It was the lullaby her mother used to sing, a simple melody about rivers that run free and birds that fly without chains. Her childlike voice trembled at first, but gained strength as the words flowed. Lightning, who always greeted visitors with furious neighs and stomping hooves, remained motionless. His ears moved in the direction of the sound, and something in his posture relaxed imperceptibly. The girl sang until the sun began to paint the horizon pale pink. When the first sleepy voices of the cowboys began to echo through the ranch, she quietly got up and returned home. Lightning followed her with his eyes until she disappeared, and for the first time in months, he didn't neigh furiously when the workers approached to feed him. This secret ritual continued for weeks. Every dawn, Sophia would sneak to the stable, sit in the same spot, and sing. Gradually, she began to bring small offerings, an apple from the orchard, carrots from the kitchen garden. She never tried to get too close, never forced contact. She simply existed in that shared space, offering her presence as a gift without expectations. Lightning began to change subtly. The cowboys noticed that he ate better, that his eyes seemed less furious. Some swore they had seen him lying down during the night, something that never happened before. But no one connected these changes to the secret visits of a 10-year-old girl who carried the ancient wisdom of her mother in her chest. It was during the 4th week that the first breakthrough happened. Charles woke up earlier than usual, disturbed by a nightmare where he lost Sophia as he had lost Helen. He decided to check his daughter's room and found the bed empty. Panic rose in his throat like bitter bile as he ran through the house calling her name. When the search led him to the stables, what he saw stopped him as if he'd been punched in the gut. Sophia was sitting too close to Lightning's paddock, her small hand extended through the bars offering a carrot. The stallion, that black demon who had humiliated grown men, approached slowly, his nostrils sniffing the air with curiosity. Charles wanted to scream, but the fear of startling the animal and causing a tragedy kept him silent. He watched paralyzed, as Lightning gently accepted the carrot from his daughter's fingers. When Sophia turned and saw her father, guilt and fear mixed on her face in an expression that broke Charles's heart. He pulled her away from the paddock with more force than he intended, his voice trembling between anger and relief. The words came out harsh, cutting like the winter wind, about disobedience, about danger, about how she could have died. Sophia cried all the tears she had held back as she was dragged back home, and behind them, Lightning let out a neigh that sounded almost like a lament. The new padlock on the main gate was as thick as a man's fist. Charles also installed a bell that would ring if someone tried to open it during the night. He ordered 2 cowboys to do night rounds and forbade Sophia from approaching within 50 yards of the stables. The girl accepted the punishment without protest, but something inside her began to wither like a flower without water. Lightning felt the absence. The days that followed, his fury returned multiplied. He broke part of the fence with violent kicks, refused food, and attacked a cowboy who tried to clean his trough. Mr. Smith, already at the end of his patience, threatened to bring the sale forward. Despair hung over the ranch like a storm cloud, about to break. It was then that fate, that mysterious force that weaves the threads of our lives, decided to intervene. The annual county fair arrived with its colorful stalls and the smell of homemade food. It was the only event of the year when Charles relaxed his vigilance, allowing Sophia to enjoy the children's attractions, while he took care of ranch business with other farmers. Among the game tents and street vendors, Sophia found something unexpected. An elderly woman with dark skin and deep wrinkles like furrows in the earth sat on a stool, braiding horse manes into intricate patterns. Her eyes, when they met Sophia's, shone with a light that seemed to come from another time. The sign in front of her simply read, "Mrs. Adams, Ancestral Wisdom." The girl approached as if pulled by invisible strings. Mrs. Adams smiled, a smile that carried the weight and lightness of 1,000 stories. Without Sophia saying a word, the old woman began to speak about horses, not superficial conversation, but deep words about the soul of these magnificent beings. She spoke about how the wild horses of the mountains chose their human companions, about how true partnership was born, not of domination, but of mutual respect. Sophia drank every word like dry earth absorbs the first rain. He told her about lightning, about her secret visits, about her father's prohibition. Mrs. Adams listened with the patience of someone who had seen the world turn many times. When the girl finished, the old woman took her small hands in hers, calloused by time, and said words that would be etched forever in her heart. "Child of light," she said, her voice hoarse like the wind in the mountains. "You carried the ancient gift. Wild horses aren't tamed, they choose to trust. Your heart speaks the language they understand, the language of respect and patient love. Don't give up on the black horse, for he hasn't given up on you either. The darkest hour is just before the dawn." Mrs. Adams then taught Sophia a secret, not taming techniques, but a way of being present that transcended words. She showed how breath could synchronize with the animals, how silence could communicate more than 1,000 shouted commands. She gave her a small wooden flute, saying that music was the bridge between worlds, and that sometimes a melody could heal wounds that human hands couldn't reach. Sophia returned home with a renewed heart and a mind buzzing with possibilities. But hope was short-lived. The following week, the 10th tamer arrived at the ranch. Richard Johnson came with a reputation for using alternative methods, which everyone knew was a euphemism for even crueler techniques. He examined Lightning with cold eyes and declared that in 3 days the horse would be saddled. Richard's first day was a spectacle of horror. He deprived Lightning of water, theorizing that thirst would make him more pliable. The second day brought tight ropes and a long pole to keep the animal cornered. Sophia watched from a distance, her stomach churning with anguish, Mrs. Adams's words echoing in her mind like a call she couldn't answer. It was on the third day that everything changed. Richard entered the paddock with a reinforced lasso and the determination of someone who doesn't accept defeat. Lightning, weakened but not broken, waited for the right moment. When the tamer threw the lasso, the stallion dodged with surprising agility and charged. Richard tried to jump the fence but wasn't fast enough. The impact threw him against a post, and the sound of breaking bones echoed through the ranch like the snapping of dry branches. The ambulance took Richard away with 3 broken ribs and a promise never to return. Mr. Smith, red with anger and frustration, summoned Charles to the main office. The conversation was brief and brutal. There were only 2 months left, and if the horse wasn't tamed, not only would it be sold, but Charles would lose his job. After all, What kind of administrator couldn't solve a problem like this? Sophia overheard the discussion through the slightly ajar door. She saw her father leave the office with his shoulders even more slumped, the weight of the world on his shoulders. That night, during dinner, Charles barely touched his food. When Sophia tried to speak, he cut her off with a tired gesture. It was then that she made the bravest decision of her young life. Next morning, Sophia asked to speak with her father and Mr. Smith together. Charles tried to dissuade her, but there was something in her eyes, a determination that painfully reminded him of Helen, that made him agree. In the office that smelled of cigar and old leather, the 10-year-old girl faced two grown men with the courage of someone with nothing to lose. "I can make Lightning trust me," she said, her voice clear, cutting through the heavy silence. "Not tame him, but build a partnership. I know things about him that none of your tamers noticed. I know he has a scar on his back left leg from when he was captured. I know he prefers fresh hay in the evening and gets restless when the wind blows from the north because that's where he came from. I know it's not malice that drives him, but fear of losing the last piece of freedom he has left." Mr. Smith studied her as if seeing her for the first time. Charles wanted to protest, but the words died in his throat. Sophia continued describing Lightning's every behavior with a precision that could only come from dedicated observation and genuine understanding. When she finished, the silence in the room was palpable. 2 weeks, Mr. Smith finally said, ignoring Charles's distressed protest. 2 weeks, but with conditions, always supervised, never alone with the animal, and at the first sign of danger, it's over. And girl, his eyes softened a fraction. If you succeed, you'll have proven something many grown men couldn't. The 2 weeks began on a morning when the sky was so blue it looked painted. Sophia entered the paddock for the first time officially, her father and 2 cowboys strategically positioned in case something went wrong. She carried only the wooden flute Mrs. Adams had given her, and an apple in her pocket. Lightning recognized her immediately. His ears moved forward, a sign of curiosity, not aggression. Sophia sat in the center of the paddock, ignoring the nervous murmurs of the observers. He began to play the flute, a simple melody that resembled the wind in the mountains. The stallion circled around her, keeping his distance but clearly interested. Days passed in a ritual of patience. Sophia never forced approach, never tried to touch without permission. She existed in Lightning's space as a constant, non-threatening presence. She talked to him in a low voice, telling stories about the mountains she imagined were his home, about freedom and choice, about how sometimes the safest cage was the one we chose to enter. The cowboys began to bet not on how long she would last, but on when she would achieve the first touch. The initial skepticism gave way to reluctant respect. There was something in the way the girl moved, how she breathed in sync with the horse, that defied everything they knew about taming. It was on the 7th day that Raphael appeared. Mr. Smith's son. He was 16 years old and had come to spend his vacation at the ranch. Tall for his age, with green eyes that contrasted with his sun-tanned skin, he watched Sophia work with a curiosity that went beyond casual. There was kindness in his face, a gentleness that contrasted with the typical roughness of country boys. "You talk to him like he's a person," Raphael observed after a session, approaching Sophia as she put away her flute. "Because he understands," she answered simply. Not the words, but the intention behind them. Raphael smiled, and something in that smile made Sophia's heart skip a beat in a way she didn't fully understand. He began to show up every day, always keeping a respectful distance but clearly fascinated by the process. Sometimes he brought her fresh water. Other times he simply sat on the fence and watched in silent solidarity. The 7th day brought the first big change. Sophia was sitting as usual when Lightning approached closer than usual. The entire ranch seemed to hold its breath as the stallion lowered his head and sniffed the girl's hair. Sophia remained motionless, only her steady breathing revealing that she was alive. Then, in a gesture that drew gasps from everyone present, Lightning gently touched her forehead with his muzzle. Charles had to lean on the fence to keep from falling. Years of fear for his daughter's safety fought against the undeniable pride of what he was witnessing. Beside him, Mr. Smith murmured something about miracles and stubborn girls. Raphael jumped off the fence and ran toward Sophia, stopping a few yards away when he realized he might scare the horse. The look they exchanged in that moment was charged with a nascent complicity. But the universe rarely allows easy victories. On the 10th day, when everything seemed to be heading for success, a storm of epic proportions formed on the horizon. The sky darkened as if night had fallen in the middle of the afternoon, and the winds began to howl like hungry wolves. The ranch animals became restless, sensing what was approaching. The storm hit the ranch with biblical fury. Lightning illuminated the sky in explosions of white light, and the rain fell in curtains so dense that you could barely see a yard away. Lightning's old stable, already weakened by years of kicks and charges, couldn't withstand it. A lightning bolt struck a nearby tree, and the crash startled the stallion so much that he charged against the damaged wall with all his might. The wood gave way with a crack that was lost in the noise of the storm. Lightning escaped into the stormy night, disappearing into the darkness like a ghost returning to the world of the dead. When morning came, bringing an almost supernatural silence after the night's violence, the paddock was empty, and there were tracks that vanished into the hills. Mr. Smith stated the obvious. A wild horse loose in the mountains would never be recaptured. The financial loss was devastating, but worse was the blow to his pride. Charles, trying to comfort Sophia, said the wrong words at the wrong time, indirectly blaming her gentle methods for the escape. If the horse had been properly contained, he argued, the storm wouldn't have been a problem. Sophia fled to her room, bitter tears streaming down her face. They weren't the tears of a spoiled child, but of someone who sees a dream shatter. She had failed Lightning, failed to prove that trust was worth more than force, failed to honor the teachings of Mrs. Adams and the memory of her mother. Raphael found her in the orchard at dusk. Sophia was sitting under the old apple tree, the flute silent in her hands. He sat beside her without saying anything for long minutes, just offering his presence as she had offered it to Lightning. When he finally spoke, his words were simple but full of faith. "He'll come back," Raphael said. "Horses that know true love always return. My grandfather taught me that." Sophia looked at him, wanting to believe but fearing hope. Raphael took a small amulet from his pocket, a miniature horseshoe carved in wood. He placed it carefully in her hands, as if transferring something precious. "It was my grandfather's," he explained. "He said it brought luck not for taming horses but for understanding them. I think you need it more than I do." The simple gesture ignited something in Sophia's chest. She squeezed the amulet and made a decision. If Lightning had fled to the mountains, that's where she would find him. Not to capture him, but to say a proper goodbye, to let him know she respected his choice for freedom. At dawn, the next day, while the ranch still slept, Sophia left. She left a simple note for her father, asking for forgiveness but explaining that she had to do this. She took water, some apples, the flute, and Raphael's amulet. The dew wet her feet as she climbed the trail leading to the hills, and the rising sun painted her path with gold. Charles woke up with a father's premonition that something was wrong. The note made him swear in despair. Within minutes, he organized a search party with the best trackers on the ranch. Raphael joined them without asking permission, his face pale with worry. Mr. Smith, surprisingly, didn't protest. There was something happening that went beyond horses and money. Meanwhile, Sophia climbed higher and higher into the mountains. The air grew thinner, and the path more treacherous. She stopped several times to catch her breath and play the flute, hoping the sound would carry on the wind to wherever Lightning was. The sun rose mercilessly, and the water ran out faster than she had calculated. It was when despair was beginning to set in that she saw him, high on a rocky outcrop silhouetted against the blue sky. Lightning watched. He was different, no longer the furious prisoner of the ranch, but a creature. In its element, mane in the wind, muscles relaxed. For a moment, Sophia thought he would flee at the sight of her, but the stallion remained motionless. The girl approached slowly, each step calculated not to appear threatening. When she reached 20 yards, she sat on a rock and took the last apple from her backpack. She carefully cut it in half and placed one part on the ground between them. The other she ate slowly, savoring each bite as she spoke softly. "I understand," she said, her voice heavy with contained emotion. "You were born free, and free you should be. I just wanted you to know it wasn't about taming you. It was about connection. About proving that humans and horses can choose to be together, not by ropes or iron, but by something greater." Lightning approached step by step. When he reached the apple, instead of eating it, he continued towards Sophia. The girl extended her trembling hand, and the stallion allowed the touch. It was different from before, no longer the reluctant permission of a captive, but the free choice of an equal. Sophia buried her face in his black mane and cried all the tears she had held back. That's how the search party found them. Sophia riding bareback on Lightning's back without saddle or reins, descending the mountain with the confidence of someone who had found their place in the world. The stallion moved carefully, attentive, to every unevenness of the terrain that could unbalance his small rider. Charles fell to his knees at the sight of them, relief and astonishment fighting for space in his chest. The return to the ranch was triumphant. Hardened cowboys took off their hats in respect when Sophia and Lightning entered through the main gate. The horse that had humiliated experienced tamers followed the girl's every subtle command, not out of fear or conditioning, but out of choice. Mr. Smith watched open-mouthed as she dismounted with the grace of someone who had done it their whole life. In the days that followed, the story spread like wildfire. Journalists came from afar to document the miracle of Silver Creek Ranch. But Sophia refused most interviews, preferring to spend her time establishing a new routine with Lightning. Together, they developed a form of communication that defied explanation. A touch here, a change in breath there, and horse and girl moved as if they were one being. Raphael became a constant presence, helping to build a new shelter for Lightning. Not a prison, but a sanctuary he could leave whenever he wanted. Working side by side, the two young people discovered a harmony that went beyond words. He admired her courage, she, his kindness. In stolen moments between work, they shared dreams and fears with the honesty of those who had not yet learned to mask their hearts. Charles watched his daughter's transformation with a mixture of pride and melancholy. He saw Helen in Sophia's every gesture, in every moment of connection with Lightning. One night, as he watched her brush the stallion at sunset, he approached slowly. Father and daughter stood side by side in silence for long minutes before he spoke. "Your mother would be proud," he said simply. "I tried so hard to protect you that I almost stopped you from being who you were born to be. Can you forgive me?" Sophia hugged her father tightly, and in that embrace there was forgiveness, love, and the promise of new beginnings. Lightning snorted softly, as if approving the reconciliation. The golden light of dusk enveloped them like a sacred mantle, and for a moment the world seemed perfectly aligned. Mr. Smith, impressed beyond words, made a decision that would change the ranch's future. Instead of a traditional taming center, Silver Creek would become a pioneer in human-horse partnership methods. Sophia, despite her young age, would be the main consultant, teaching what she had learned from Lightning and Mrs. Adams. The old woman, when she heard the news, sent her blessing along with sacred herbs for a cleansing smoke ritual for the new beginning. The first official student was a skittish colt brought from a neighboring ranch. The owners had given up hope. The animal refused to let any human approach. Sophia studied the colt for days before attempting contact. She discovered that he had lost his mother too early and carried deep trauma. With infinite patience, using the techniques she had developed, she managed not only to approach but to create a bond of trust in a matter of weeks. Raphael documented everything with an old camera his father had given him. He had a talent for capturing moments, the exact instant a horse decided to trust, the sparkle in Sophia's eyes when she achieved a breakthrough, the way the morning light transformed the ranch into something magical. His records would, years later, become study material in veterinary universities. The ranch's transformation attracted visitors from all over the country. Families brought horses considered lost causes, and Sophia, with Raphael's growing help and Charles's careful supervision, worked what many called miracles. But she always corrected them. They weren't miracles. It was simply listening to what the animals were trying to say. On an especially significant afternoon, 6 months after that fateful storm, the ranch organized its first public demonstration. Sophia and Lightning would be the stars, showing the world what true partnership meant. The field was packed with spectators, including some of the tamers who had failed with the stallion. Mrs. Adams occupied a place of honor in the front row, her eyes shining with ancestral pride. The demonstration began with Sophia entering the field on foot, Lightning loose beside her. Without verbal commands, without equipment, they performed a synchronized dance of movements that drew gasps from the audience. The stallion responded to every subtle change in her posture, and when Sophia finally mounted, it was with the fluidity of water finding its natural course. They galloped across the field in complex patterns, jumped improvised obstacles, and at one point, Lightning reared majestically while Sophia remained perfectly balanced, her arms open as if embracing the sky. When he landed, the silence was absolute for a second, before the crowd erupted in deafening applause. But the most touching moment came afterward. Sophia dismounted and deliberately walked away from Lightning, walking to the center of the field. The stallion remained where he was, free to leave if he wished. The crowd held its breath as the seconds stretched. Then, without any command or encouragement, Lightning trotted up to Sophia and rested his head on her shoulder in a gesture of pure affection. Raphael captured this moment on his camera, but kept the next photo to himself, Sophia looking towards him with a smile that shone brighter than the sun. They had shared an extraordinary journey, and somehow, in the process of teaching a horse to trust, 2 young hearts had learned the same lesson. Charles watched from the edge of the field, his hand intertwined with that of a gentle woman he had met at the fair, a veterinarian who had come to study Sophia's methods, and ended up discovering that lonely hearts sometimes find healing in the most unexpected places. Helen would always be his first love, but perhaps, just perhaps, there was room for a new chapter. As the sun set on that memorable day, painting the sky with the same fiery colors as the day it all began, Sophia allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought of all the horses that still needed help, of all the people who still believed that force was the only language animals understood. There was so much work ahead, so many bridges to build between 2 worlds that had misunderstood each other for so long. Lightning snorted softly beside her as if reading her thoughts. Sophia stroked his neck, feeling the powerful muscles beneath his black coat. He had taught her more than she could ever have imagined, about courage, about patience, about how sometimes the greatest victories came not from conquering, but from understanding. Raphael approached with 2 glasses of lemonade, the simple gesture charged with future promise. They sat together on the fence, watching the last families leave, the ranch returning to its usual peace. Between them, words were unnecessary. There was comfort in the shared silence, in the certainty that some bonds, once formed, could withstand any storm. Mrs. Adams passed them before leaving, her wrinkled hand briefly touching Sophia's head. In a silent blessing, "The seed you planted today will blossom in gardens you can't even imagine," she said, her eyes seeing futures others couldn't. "Keep listening with your heart, child of light. The world needs more people who speak the language of the soul." That night, as the stars appeared one by one in the clear sky, Sophia took one last ride with Lightning. They rode to the hill overlooking the entire valley, the same place where she used to watch the ranch as a child and dream of the day she could be among the horses. The full moon bathed everything in liquid silver, transforming the mundane into magic. There, high on that hill, with the wind whispering ancient secrets and Lightning breathing calmly beneath her, Sophia made a silent promise. She would dedicate her life to building bridges where others built walls, to teaching that love and respect could achieve what force and domination never could. And somewhere in the distant mountains, as if nature itself approved, a chorus of wild horses neighed in harmony with the wind. Silver Creek Ranch became a living legend, Years later, when people asked Sophia about the secret of her success, she always gave the same answer she had given on that first demonstration day. I didn't try to tame him. I just showed him I was willing to be tamed by his wisdom. And in her eyes, there was always the sparkle of someone who had known true magic, the kind that is born when two beings choose to trust each other against all odds. The story of Sophia and Lightning spread like seeds in the wind, germinating in hearts across the country. Parents began to look with new eyes at their children's impossible dreams. Experienced tamers started questioning old methods, and somewhere, always somewhere, a lonely child found the courage to approach an injured animal and offer not domination, but friendship. And you, who have followed every moment of this journey, when will you allow patience to conquer haste in your heart? When will you choose to extend your hand in trust instead of closing it in control? Because in the end, we all have our wild horses, those untamable dreams that are just waiting for someone brave enough to sit in silence and sing the right song. May your next choice be guided by Sophia's wisdom. Sometimes the greatest act of strength is kindness, and the fastest path to the heart is through the infinite patience of love.